If public policies were to work for us as good as they look on paper, we'd all be living in utopia, and I wouldn't have a job. But I'm here and I'm speaking today, so that means I think only one of those things are true. In the private sector, there's a clear pathway for innovation and scale. If you have a good idea, you're able to de-risk it, demonstrate it, raise funds, show that it works, maybe raise further funds, get acquired, or take the IPO path. But in the social sector and in the development space, the market is broken. We operate in a space where usually markets and governments have failed. So how do you work in a space like this? How do you actually then think of innovating and taking things to scale? In fact, India is infamously called the graveyard of pilots. Not because there are bad ideas, but because we have innovation at the edge with scale at the center and a bridge, and there's no bridge to really connect them. As NGOs, we're usually designing pilots, projects within the safe bubble of a grant. And then when it needs to come out of this bubble and then go into the public system, it usually fails. Governments, on the other hand, are extremely large machines, very good at scale and infrastructure, but they can absolutely not be as agile and nimble to work with communities to get things right. So, what happens because of these? Policy is usually designed for an imaginary average person who maybe might not exist in real life. If you look at some of the best policies that we've had in the past, the idea of an Anganwadi worker or an ASHA worker, all of this has come from very deep work that has happened in the civil society space. And through decades of work, it has made its way into policy. A couple of years ago, we asked ourselves a question: is there a way that we can build a process and a framework to actually design things with communities, try and test policies with them, and take them to scale? And is this a process that we can replicate and actually help create more equitable policies? I'll, if you think of a typical tribal kitchen in Meghalaya, uh, if you can, next. So this is what a typical tribal kitchen looks like. A lot of you can see the smoke. There's smoke on the walls. Women cook over an open fire. It is a respiratory hazard. The house is usually made of bamboo, so it's a fire hazard. A lot of these look like a problem. And I want you to think of what are some of the potential ways that we could solve this. Maybe a smokeless chulha, or a induction stove perhaps, maybe an LPG. But let me tell you this, if you can see the meat that is there right above the smoke, the meat is cured because of the smoke, and that's how the communities preserve it. A little to the left, you can see seeds. These seeds are also cured and stored because of the smoke, and this is how they store it for their next harvest. Just above that, you can see those bamboo equipment. All of the bamboo equipment is also cured because of the smoke, and that's what they use in their fields. That's what they use for fishing. And what's not in this picture, the thatch roof, which is also cured because of the smoke, so that termites don't come into it. So if we were to look at this problem from far away and think of a solution that removes smoke, which is actually solving 4 to 5 everyday problems for the community, we'll actually be giving them a solution which is a downgrade. It would actually not solve these 5 problems, and it would solve one problem, which honestly is a problem that we think is a problem from far away. So policies like this, if we give communities a design that replaces something that it does not understand, it's going to fail on the ground. In order to get things right, we need to design closer to communities. And that's where we built the Center for Accelerated Development. The Center for Accelerated Development is a framework that actually allows us to go closer to communities, understand from their lived experience, their lived expertise, as to what are the things that are not working for them. Then try and work together with governments, with CSR, with other partners in the ecosystem, bring everyone together and actually try and design policies closer to communities before we even think of scale and launching it at scale. So this is a bridge between policies, and people. If the private sector has venture capital, acquisitions, and IPO, then the social and the development space also needs an equivalent. So the CFAT framework brings together systems, markets, philanthropy, and civil society to allow what we call as a learning layer to stay close to the problem, to iterate, to design, to fail, to really learn what works, and then design a pilot on it using philanthropic money, and use that evidence to then scale with state governments. In the last couple of years, we asked ourselves, okay, this looks good in theory. What if we actually take it to the ground? So in the state of Meghalaya, we've been implementing this framework for the last 4 years. And today, I think I want to talk to you a little bit about what has happened. One of the gaps that we found on the ground was India and Meghalaya does not have a publicly funded community space that's accessible to communities. We have schools for a certain age limit, Anganwadis for a certain age limit, a health issue, you go to the health center. Where do you go if you want to just get together as a community? So we designed something that is now called the Chief Minister's Youth Center. I'd like to show you a snapshot of the Chief Minister's, of one of the learners at the youth center. Devamot and Nikki, 20 years old and 15 years old, designed a electric rice husking machine because they saw that doing this manually was very labor intensive for their community. These spaces have now allowed youth to really come in, solve community problems, and actually demonstrate it to the community. So we started with 2 centers funded by CSR about 4.5 years ago. We now have 22 centers which are funded by the state, and we've just signed a contract with the government of Meghalaya and the World Bank to expand this to 64 centers in Meghalaya over the next 6 years. So imagine this, 2 centers started 4.5 years ago with little bit of CSR and philanthropic capital, giving a 10-year runway for a policy to evolve and actually grow into the state versus launching something at scale and then figuring out why it's not working. Similarly, an entrepreneur called Sukulin, who is a entrepreneur near Cherrapunji or Sohra, who manufactures millet-based products. She's extremely far away from where the capital of Meghalaya, Shillong is. A lot of the policies of incubation to support an entrepreneur like her are not available close to her. So what we designed along with the state of Meghalaya is a doorstep incubation approach where instead of an entrepreneur trying to go and find government services, there are people from the government who actually come, sit with an entrepreneur, figure out what their needs are, and then actually help them grow in their business. Her capacity has grown 5x in the last 10 months. She's been able to transition from a diesel-powered machine to a solar-powered machine and also diversify her products. And like her, the learning from working with her have enabled similar services to more than 300 entrepreneurs. And now the state is scaling it across all the 55 blocks in Meghalaya. A lot of you might know of the living root bridges in Meghalaya, but it's absolutely absurd that a lot of the children in Meghalaya still learn about the London Bridge in their Anganwadi when they start their learning journey. When communities have such extremely contextual and things that they have built and community wisdom, and allowing a child to start their learning journey through something that's so absurd and alien to them is not giving the child a fair chance. So what we did with the government of Meghalaya is we designed 45 early childhood learning storybooks, which actually reflect the culture, the identity of the communities that these children come with. These stories are now being integrated into the curriculum, the same songs, the lullabies that already exist in the community. And these are now, the children are now going to learn by looking at something that's extremely familiar to them. And we believe that this will allow them to see themselves represented in these stories and give them a better level playing field to start their learning journey. So a lot of these ideas actually seem pretty cool. It got initial traction, but we also then had to figure out how do we get this to stick in the system? Because we know that in a lot of cases, good ideas handed over as documents to the government don't really work. So we came up with a design where For each of these ideas, we made a team of local fellows around these ideas. And because these are local fellows and not consultants who are flown in, these are people who really understand these problems, they've lived it, they can relate to it. We build their capacity through the fellowship to actually go and implement on the ground and demonstrate this at scale. And then we hand over this whole set of people that we have built to go into the government system. And from there on, they build within the government system so that the DNA of these solutions don't change. So what did all of this look like? So in the last 4.5 years, we've been able to use about $500,000 of philanthropic capital. That's about 4 crores of philanthropy to unlock more than $20 million through public funding. That's about 180 crores of public funding for statewide policies in a small state like Meghalaya. Now imagine what could happen if we were to do this in a lot of other places. And that's exactly the question that we had. Okay, we've maybe pulled off something nice in Meghalaya, but what happens when somebody else does this framework? How is it going to work? Looking at this, we built something called the India Health and Climate Resilience Fund. It also has a similar, it follows the same framework with work happening across Karnataka, Telangana, Jharkhand, and Assam, where we're trying to look at the same thought process and the design process to actually de-risk policy design with communities on the ground, and then see what emerges out of it so that we can build more evidence around it. I'd like to share one of the ideas that's come out of this process. A lot of you might know that Assam floods during the monsoons. For a good 3 to 4 months in a year, all public services are completely cut off. During this time is also when there's a surge in maternal mortality rates in Assam. People are not able to access the physical health centers, and hence service is not possible. So using this framework, one of the things that we are now designing and supporting is the concept of a hospital ship on the Brahmaputra, where there are tertiary care that is available for all sorts of ailments, which is active during a peak climate event like the floods. There are feeder boats that actually come into the ship, bringing their patients. So patients living in the middle of this situation are able to get access to quality healthcare. There are specialists who are envisioned to be on the ship. And I think this is an example of what a contextual solution look like. So copy pasting something that works somewhere else to another place is not going to help in making equitable policies. So I think our vision going ahead, our goal is to try and take this framework to as many communities and as many states as possible. We often talk about government policy as something that trickles down to communities. But if you think of a forest never grows top down. A forest is nurtured from the ground up. And it takes a lot of nurturing, a lot of building the foundation in order to eventually arrive at a forest. But continuously, what we keep doing in the development and public policy space is we try and build the canopy first without really understanding the foundation on the ground. And I think what I want to share here today is that we can flip this script. By using frameworks like this, we are going to be able to really understand what the needs of the communities are, design and test policies that might actually work for them, and eventually end up with more equitable policies for all of us. Thank you.